How's it going, guys? Klutch here. Once again, welcome back to the channel. Today we're looking at weeds. We're going to see exactly what the effects are of weeds, how to get rid of them. A bit of a tutorial series today again. If you've been following the channel at all, we're going to take a look at exactly all it's to do with weeds and see if it's been fixed at all. I know it's a bit of a sticking point for some. We are in, 1.2 patch of the terraforming. We're still in the terraforming patch, the latest update for Farming Sim 19. So what we've got here, we've got our fields kind of prepped. We're just finishing this off, and then we're going to start planting some crops and doing some tests with that. So stick around. We'll be back, and we'll get to our pitter patter.
Klutch simulations.
Alright guys, so welcome back. What we've got here is we've got a few different plots that I've made with wheat. These all have roughly the same amount. I've used the Stara just to do one swath or one stretch down each of these little plots here and just plant some wheat, so it's a fairly balanced system. Now in each one of these you can see that we have roughly the same, like I said, and they're in different stages. So I waited for one stage to finish growing and then I would plant the next, and so on and so forth. So this one here I just finished planting. You can see here growing wheat, everything's fully fertilized. We're not going to go into fertilizing, just consider this fully fertilized. There's 2 stages of fertilizer been put down on each one of these, but we're not going to go into that on this episode. So here is first stage. You can see first stage growth. I've done 0 weeding, as you can tell, 56% weeds. Same up here. Now we're up to growing. This is the next step for growth. This here is the last step before harvest. And then finally at the very end, we have the fully grown wheat ready for harvest. Let's take a quick look on the mini map here. So you can see the different shades of coloring here on how they all work. So as they're growing up, and then finally when they get ready to harvest, then they're yellow. The different colors on the harvest for ready to harvest, as I'm aware of it, it makes no difference. I have not done any tests on this. My understanding is that regardless if it's as soon as it turns yellow, it is the same amount of product regardless of how yellow it is or orange it is. However, just to notify you when it is getting ready to wither. So that's what that's letting you know. If it's in orange, that means that if you have withering turned on, this crop is about to wither, so you better harvest it. I should also mention, as far as settings go, we have plant growth is obviously on fast, so I could go through this quicker. Plant withering's off, crop destruction's off, periodic plowing is off, lime was off, and weeds are the only thing that's on right now, just for the purposes of this test. So we're going to talk about weeding first. The first thing I did notice, this here, the first one I planted has 0 weeds in it, and I did not weed it. Now when I first planted it, I had weeds set to off. So my understanding is that the game recognizes whatever state you have the game at when you plant it, and it will leave it at that state for the whole time. So once you plant it, you could turn weeds back on, and this crop will still not grow weeds. Interesting, I didn't know that. As for the rest, obviously weeds have been turned on. We have 2 different states of weeds. Now weeds grow a lot like crops do, only they're on a different interval. So it's possible for you to have some crops. Now let me just take a quick look and I'll show you exactly what I mean here. If we go up to this little one, this one I just finished planting, weeds have already started to grow on a certain portion of it. You can see they're on a different side right here, and the weeds here have grown up from stage 1 to stage 2, and we got stage 1 weeds over here, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, weeds are 50%. We got weeds over here. Weeds must be up to close to 100. Yeah, there we go. Weeds are going up pretty steadily here. It's just interesting now. There's 2 stages of weeds. Stage 1, which you see right here, and this here is stage 2. This one's all stage 1. Now it's on, like I said, a different growth pattern, but it grows very similar to the way a crop grows. So you'll start to see stages slowly grow up, and it'll slowly move across your field. Now this one, I'm assuming, will slowly start coming down this direction here and fill up the rest of this field. Now it may have been that with a weed stage hit as we were in the middle of planting our crop, and that's why it's at this point. I don't have an exact answer yet, but why it's cut it in half, it's very strange. The way it just kind of stopped here for these 3. Anyways, we will take a look at what our options are for all these different types. Now there's 2 different ways you can get rid of these weeds. We'll take a look at those, and then once we're done all that, we're going to go in and take a look at the difference in what our crop produces if there are weeds in it. All right, let's go back and take a look. All right, so as long as our weeds are at first stage, which is the low ones right here, you have no plants that are growing up quite like this with all the colorful flowers on it. you're able to use a weeder. Now, you have several different options. This one here is a mid-range one. Yeah, I'm not sure what the model number is on this, but anyways, it's usually non-powered. It just kind of walks through, you unfold it, similar to a plow or a cultivator or anything like that, and you simply drive through it. Now let's go take a look, and we're going to see what happens when we try and go through the larger field of weeds. So we have activated it. You don't need to really activate, you just need to lower it. There's no activation button. But you see, the weeds are still in this crop. Well, that's no good. That doesn't help us at all. All right. Well, let's go take a look at what happens when we decide to go through an actual field now. And by actual field, I mean a field with weeds that are in stage 1. Yeah, we can go, you know what, let's go right to the end here. We're going to leave these ones, and I'll show you what I mean. Because this will be actually a perfect test, because there's stage 2 halfway up. And we'll lower this down. There we go. So you can see now that the weeds are just disappearing as we drive right over top of them. So this is all you need to do once you see these weeds. If you can get everything in stage 1. Oh, and you can see the weeds are all kind of creeping towards me right now. That's interesting. Yeah, if you can get everything in stage 1, then you don't need to worry about it. That'll take care of it. Now once we hit stage 2, all of a sudden, nope, sorry, this weeder is no longer of any use, and you are done. That's unfortunate. Anyways, so that's how you get rid of stage 1. How do we get rid of stage 2 weeds? Wow, let's go take a look at our options there. Alright, so in order to get rid of stage 2 weeds, you're going to need to go with some kind of a liquid herbicide. You can find that in the store under pallets, and then herbicide tank. You have to purchase one of these. Or if you have a mod that allows you to put a silo with a liquid fertilizer unit, or liquid herbicide, sorry, that will be an option as well. So we have 3 different options right here. We have a backpack style mount that goes in the back of one of your tractors. You've got the trailer mount, a pull behind, and then you have the actual vehicle a sprayer as well. So all these can take liquid herbicide or liquid fertilizer, so they can do double duty. In fact, this one can do pellet fertilizer at the same time. There's an actual pellet tank at the back as well as the herbicide tank. But we're not going to focus on that one too much right now. We're going to just look at general herbicide. Now, one thing to make note of with these, if you want to change the duty of what it's doing, so for instance, if you had it set up to fertilize and you decide, you know what, it's time, I need to get rid of some weeds, well, you can do that. So right now I've got, as you see in the bottom right hand corner, I've got this full of fertilizer, liquid fertilizer. I can unload that just by simply hitting the unload button, whatever it may be for your particular controls. Take a look in the help menu if you're having problems with that. Now you can see there's a blue icon on it. That is liquid fertilizer. Now I need to get liquid herbicide into it. I can just roll up beside it and load it with the herbicide. So both the trailer, all the vehicles will do this. You'll be able to dump out whatever you don't need and reload it with it, which is kind of a nice to have. Let's see if it's going to fill that. Perfect. All right. So that's all we need to know about vehicles. Let's go take a look at our stage 2 weeds and see what we can get rid of here. Alright, so I'm going to go down. I'll leave this one here as is. This will be our test for later. But this one right here. Alright, we'll do this one. And should note you can move on this particular one. You should be able to move this up and down. There you go, depending on the height of your crops. Because you want them to be just above the crop, basically. So you don't want it to be way up on too high. For instance, on this crop, it's down quite a bit lower. So you want it to be a little bit down further, so you're ideally closer to it. And we will fire away. So now you should be able to see the weeds are withering as we bypass over top of them. Now it's okay, they'll stay like that actually until probably you harvest. From what I've seen, sometimes they should not affect the actual amount you harvest. We'll double check that when it comes to the harvest time, but yeah, once the color has left them and they look like they're withered, you should be good to go and harvest them. So we'll finish this off, and I do want to test this with stage 1. I'm curious to see if it has an effect on stage 1 weeds. I'm sure it does. At least it should. But it wouldn't be the first time that Farming Sim has sent me for a loop and made something that didn't make any sense. Alright. So we've gone across, and we're going to jump over here and take care of that one as well. Oh, I missed some. How did I miss that? There we go. That's better. Yeah, so it does take care of stage 1 weeds as well. As you can see, they're withering as we pass over them. Perfect. So we'll finish this here all off. And then we're going to advance some time and see what happens to our crop afterwards. So that is basically the only 2 ways of getting rid of weeds right there, guys. You've seen both ways. It's not rocket science. Spray, stage 2, or you can do the cheaper way of just weeding with one of the weeders for stage 1. Unfortunately, like I said, if it gets to stage 2, you do need to use the sprayer, which ends up costing you some product. You also need to know that once the crop has made it to harvest, once harvest has hit, you will not be able to weed anymore. It's no longer possible to weed. The weeds that are in there are there for good, and you are stuck, unfortunately. We'll demonstrate that in a couple seconds here, or well, once we have a chance to make this crop grow to harvest. But let's just finish this up, and we're done. All right. Let's move along here and see what goes on with our next stage. Alright guys, so we are ready to do some harvesting. We've got 3 crops here that are ready to go. The first one here is a crop that we had that we liquid herbicided, so that you can see there is some dead stalks of weeds in there mixed throughout. Well, that'll be one of our tests. Over here we have one with weeds still in it. This is 100% weeds still. Yeah. We need to worry about that. Obviously, that's going to be a bit of an issue. And then over here is our test. This is 0 weeds. This one here, weeds were turned off at the start 4. So we had 0 weeds in that one, full weeds, and then herbicide used on this one here. You can see our weeds are still growing up here. Now, there's one thing funny I wanted to mention actually before we go too far into this. I was under the impression, and there we go. So half of this field has gotten weeds again. Now, we didn't weed this one, did we? So it seems to me, no, this one here, sorry, that's right. This is the latest one. I was under the impression that sometimes weeds would come back into a field you already weeded, and it does not appear that that's the case. If you weed once, it seems so far that that's the only time you'll have to weed. You should not have to weed twice ever, regardless when you decide to weed a crop. So I'm going to try and weed this one here right away quickly, just to see if that makes any kind of, that shouldn't matter though. We'll leave that alone for now actually, because there's no point. But if I could have swore that if you weeded right off the bat that it would cause a problem and you would have to weed potentially again before harvest. Doesn't look like it right now. Anyways, let's get down to harvest and we'll see what our numbers look like. Alright, so to start with, we are doing the test. This here is the crop that has 0 weeds in it. It was set to no weeds on by default, so there should have been no chance for weeds to ever be in this. Fully fertilized, we didn't need to do anything else to it. Alright, so we'll get to the end here and we'll see where we are at and mark that down. We'll also put the straw swath on here so that, yeah, we'll see if there's any change in bales as well, just for fun. We'll see if we get a different amount for bales. I have a funny feeling it'll be relatively close. You probably need a larger test in order to figure that out, but we'll give it a shot regardless. Why not? Alright, just coming to the end here. Looks like we're going to be about 1,300 liters, roughly, give or take. 1,310 liters. Okay, I think it's liters at least. Shut this off. All right, so 1,310. Next up, we're gonna go take a look at what we get when we have full of weeds. We'll go dump this out. All right, so we are back to empty. 1,310 is what the test or the static line or static crop was. Our litmus test will that'll be, I guess, our call sign for that one. In theory, this should be less considerably. We'll see exactly how much less. I'm curious to find out. And I'm also kind of curious to see, yeah, will there be a difference in straw? You would think there would have to be if there's a difference, less wheat as well, right? It would only make sense. Alright, so, well, we're getting pretty close. Looks like we're down maybe the 25%. Is that the number we're going to be down? And I believe that's what they say it is. We're going to be right around that 1100 marker. There we go. 1161. 1310 was test. So with weeds, we are down to 1161, which is roughly at 25%. I'll do the math on that in a second here. All right, let's go check our last crop. So herbicide was used. I'm hoping this is around 1310 again. We'll go double check. All right, so we are emptied again, and now we are going through our crop that had been herbicided. So the weeds have been killed, and we'll see what we get out of this. Now, like I said, it was 1310 liters for the first crop, no weeds. Weeds left in, we were at 1164. Difference only ends up being roughly 88%, so give or take 5% for margin of error there. You're only looking at 15, what does that be, like 10 to 15% of your crop loss because of weeds. 10 to 15%. That's not as big of a number as I was actually expecting there. Anyways, let's see what we get here. So this, in theory, should be right around that 1310 marker once again. In theory. Alright, we're hit 1100 almost. It's not going to be quite the same, a little bit less. Now a little bit less. Now, once again, that could be right into our margin of error for the actual plant growth. So 1224, 1310 was this first one. There is maybe a little bit of a difference in crop size. Like it looks like this one is a little bit longer, which could be enough to change that variance off. But even so, it's longer than the one with weeds. So you're probably looking at less than, it'd probably be about a 10% difference between having weeds and not having weeds. All right, well that answers that. All right, so I almost forgot I wanted to check the amount of bales as well, straw bales in this. Now, it's going to be pretty tough to notice if there is much of a difference. I mean, if it's only 10% of a 4,000 liter bale is not a lot, obviously. And it will be stuck in the machine, so I mean, I'd have to get 3 machines out here to take care of this otherwise. So we're just going to see, we'll do a quick test here and see if there is any kind of a difference. I'm thinking there's not going to be much, but you never know. So we'll pick this one up, I'll go get another machine, and we'll give that a shot and see if there's much of a difference there. Let's see how many bales we get out of this. Alright, so this looks like it's going to get us 1 full bale at least. And then we'll grab another machine. Yeah, so 1 bale, and what's the second amount here is the question. 1,400. So that answers that. So 1 bale and 1,400 liters. So we'll see what the second one gets us. Alright, so our first one had roughly 1,400 liters. I think it was, no, 1,400 left over, so it'd be 5,400 for straw. And I'm expecting that this will be a 10% decrease, just like our harvest was, but we'll see. Only one way to find out. Alright, so we're about to hit the 4,000 liter mark. Are we going to get 4,000? Yeah, we are. Just barely. And then once again, we're about 10% down. There we go, 800, only 800 left. So roughly, yeah, about 10%. So you're going to be losing 10% in straw as well as your crop from weeds. That answers that. Interesting, isn't that right? Well, I think that answers all my questions as far as that goes. Let's move on to all these other crops that I want to take a look at. Like I said, we'll get onto that right away here. And before we move on, guys, I just wanted to quickly make note of this. These crops here obviously have not been harvested yet. It's been quite a while. We've been sitting on these. These ones here we did weed. You can see there's some dead weeds in there. This one here was stage 1. We weeded in here. No weeds have grown back anywhere on these crops, and it's been quite a while. This here was at stage 1 when we left off the actual stage 1 for the crop, and weeds have fully developed, obviously, because we did not weed. And this here was just planted as we left off that last video, and it's fully grown. So there should be weeds developing on these crops, but they have not yet. So no ground disturbances happened, and I figure that is what is the key for this. As soon as we harvest, as you can see with these crops over here, we've harvested. Now the ground can take weeds again. So that is kind of the key there. Once you harvest, then all of a sudden the ground has been disturbed, and the weeds can now come back. So if you don't harvest and you have withering set off, obviously, because this would have been withered by now, but no weeds have shown up since that point in time. Anyways, I thought that was kind of interesting, so I wanted to share that before we moved on to checking the different types of crops. All right, so for our last series of tests, we've got some beets with and without weeds. We got some corn with and without weeds. And last of all, we got some barley with and without weeds. Let's go see what we get. I have a funny feeling it should be the same, but hey, you don't know if you don't try. So we're expecting to be a roughly, what is it, a 10% difference. You know what, we'll do weeds first. We'll do the weeds first. Boom. All right, let's go to town, and we'll see what we get here. Look at all those lovely weeds. I wonder if you can see them going in. It'd be funny if you could see the weeds going into the tank. That'd be good. So like I said, what was it for our wheat? We were roughly 10%, it was 88%, something like that. Now that being said, I'm pretty sure this here crop that we are on is technically a little bit bigger as far as length goes. Just that might be a little bit, so that might explain the extra 2%. We were expecting to see 10, so that's what we roughly get is about 10% difference. So we'll see if it's all the same all the way across. I'm assuming it probably is. But spoiler alert, we'll find out just to make sure. I'm actually more curious about the beets. That's not a crop that I harvest very often, so we'll see. We shall see. So we're looking to be about, you know what, it looks almost identical to wheat. Not a surprise there, I suppose. We're looking at a roughly 1,200? 1,223. 1,223, all right. Let's go see what we get on a fresh, non-weeded patch. All right, here we go. We're just finishing up this one. 1223 was with weeds. Yeah, 1243 without. That seems like barely anything to me. Wow. That's 98%. Now, give or take, probably plus or minus 5. So still, there's no more than 93, 94% difference. So you're only losing a couple percentage by having weeds. That's not much. Huh, that seems odd. That seems a lot different than wheat. Well, not a lot different, but it does seem different. So it seems like barley does not, there's no way that could be possible, but I guess it is. Potentially. I mean, they're fairly similar fields. I don't see how it would be. Let's try the corn next. Alright, so corn is a little bit tougher because this head is so small compared to a one with a bigger harvester. But I think we're getting all of it in one swath here, which is perfect. And if I missed any like that one, I'll get it on the way back just for comparison's sake. So we're going to be around, looks like 2,000, a little bit over, just a touch over, not much. Alright, we'll lift that up. There's 2 stalks I gotta grab just to be 100% perfect. So that was with weeds. With weeds, we're getting approximately 260 would be my guess. Maybe not quite. We'll do this last one here. And yeah, 260. Now, 257. Out of curiosity, can I harvest the wheat or these weeds? Do they count for any product in the grain bin? I see there's a few sitting here. Only one way to find out. Let's just see. No, of course not. You never know. All right, so 2057 is with weeds. Let's find out without. All right, so now we are, oh, I missed one here. Without weeds, it looks very similar without weeds than it does with. I mean, there is barely a difference. Like barely a difference with or without weeds. 2057 was with weeds. We end up at, what are we gonna end up at? 2113 is what we end up with without. 97% with weeds is what you get for that. That is ridiculous. There is no point to weeding. That's what I'm picking up right now. I don't know if I'm doing something wrong here, if I'm missing something, but it's starting to seem kind of pointless to weed right now. I'm just saying, everything else is the same. Fertilization states are all identical. I don't quite understand. let's go check the sugar beets, or the beets. All right, so we're finishing off the weeded beets, or no, the beets with weeds. Yeah, beets with weeds. 12,115, or 12,115, I should say. Wow. So that's what we end up with right there. We're gonna go over to the ones that have been weeded with no weeds now, and we'll give that a shot and see where we're at with that as well. I'm curious. This is interesting. All right, so we're just finishing up with the beets. I think we're actually going to be substantially more here. Well, not substantially, but a decent amount more compared to what we've seen so far with barley and corn. Yeah, let's see here. We just hit the 12,000 mark. We've already bypassed. Yeah, okay. It was 12,100. We hit 13,000 now. Divided by. Let's just see. All right. 1, 3, 4, 6, 7. That's 90%. So it's a 10% difference with sugar beets. Interesting. All right. So a 10% difference with sugar beets, but corn and barley, we're closer to only 3 to 5% difference between having weeds and not having weeds. I'm a little bit lost on that, to be perfectly honest. I was expecting 10%, similar to what wheat was, but only 3 to 4. I don't know. Maybe some more testing is warranted. Anyways, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Hopefully it helped you out a little bit, because I'm still a little bit confused, to be perfectly honest now, but maybe some more testing. Like I said, we'll have to take a look at that later on. If you did find this useful, or you liked this video, make sure you guys hit that like button. And of course, if you're not a subscriber, guys, don't forget to subscribe. And other than that, guys, we will catch you guys next time. Once again, this is Klutch. Over and out.